And now, welcome back to Chapter 5. I call this A Monster in the Night. Well, before I begin, please excuse me. I've just had some dental surgery, and, well, I'm missing more teeth now on the bottom. And it may be a while before I can actually get that fixed. What I'm dealing with now is the challenge of pronunciation. Missing those teeth actually causes a bit of a speech impediment. And so this will be my first reading since that dental surgery. And so I'm just mentioning that. Of course, at some future place in the distant future, because I still have to get through these chapters, and my present day is far, far in the future. But yeah, at some future point, I will talk about that experience as well. Hopefully way before then, I will get this fixed, so I don't have to deal with the challenges that go with something like this, which of course is not just a challenge of pronunciation, but an emotional challenge as well. Anyway, thank you for joining me for Chapter 5 of I, PLEIADES, an autobiographical work, this chapter once again entitled A Monster in the Night. And now, before we move completely away from this area of time, I shall relate some events that I can't quite place in location or time, but believe that they exist in this general vicinity. There was the time when I and a little friend had wandered off to the end of the street, and my friend found a piece of used chewing gum on the sidewalk. He said that he wasn't allowed to chew gum at home. I said that neither was I, which wasn't true. He then meaning which wasn't true, that I was allowed to chew gum, but he had said he wasn't, so I don't know, for some little kid reason, I decided to say I wasn't allowed either. He then suggested that since neither of us were allowed to chew gum, that we could share it right here, right now, and that no one would know. So that's just what we proceeded to do. My friend first, and then me. I still remember the grit of sand that was mixed in with it. I didn't really like the gum or the grittiness of it, but I liked the adventure and camaraderie of the experience. Yeah, I still remember the grit, like the sand in the gum. It was like, ugh. And I didn't seem to write an age down here, but I guess I must have been, I guess maybe around 4 or 5, something like that. Maybe I'll mention the age further on in here. But then again, since I'm referring to the previous chapter, then if I did mention an age in the previous chapter, then that'll of course bring into awareness what age period I'm speaking of. There was the time when my friends and I had found a place in the road where some fresh road work had taken place. The road crew had filled the hole with fresh blacktop when they were done. It was marvelously wonderful to dig up and play with, but very unpleasant was the experience of having my mother wash it off of me using turpentine. Yeah, that totally sucked. I still remember sucked. I still remember some of the feeling of her scrubbing at it with the turpentine to get it off. Very unpleasant. One day, while playing with some friends in a vacant lot, we were throwing sand up in the air. This, of course, is another event. I'm moving through different events. Throwing sand up in the air, grabbing handfuls upon handfuls, throwing them up and into the air with the wild abandon of a toddler. In a moment of sand-filled ecstasy, I decided to open my eyes to the sky to watch the sand fall back to earth from the furthest reaches of our childish abandon. I can still see the sand falling back earthward and I-ward from the sun. Oh, the pain! Exclamation point for sure. The blinding agony of it all. I ran stumbling, screaming and crying back to my house, eyes filled with sand and tears in search of my mother and the hope of rescue. Then there was the time when I was occupying myself with my newfound game of attempting to fly by using the railing of our front porch as a launching platform. A wonderful but short-lived adventure which ended by my landing on my mouth, thus gaining for my efforts a mouthful of front yard dirt. Yeah, that sucked. My first look inside of a book. Overwhelming is what it was. It was in the entryway of a house in which we lived. I opened its cover and looked inside. It was a dictionary. I remember that. I remember thinking and feeling that I would never be able to translate the meaning of so much. In that moment, the idea of ever being able to read felt more than just a bit hopeless. I do remember that. It was overwhelming. The same house as the dictionary, before John's house, I remember now. The landlady had a boy who suffered from some form of what they called back then mental retardation. My mom was concerned about him being around me lest something unpleasant happen. But this one day when I was playing in the backyard, he had come out to play and had decided that I needed to get something that he had thrown over the fence. Well, I wasn't allowed to leave the yard, so I wasn't going to get it. But he decided that I was, and so started threatening me with violence. I was scared, and was hoping that my mother would notice out the window that I was in trouble, but she was nowhere in sight. He was telling me that he was going to pick me up and put me over the fence into the next yard so I could get whatever it was that he had thrown there. Over the fence? Into the next world? Oh my God, no. What would I do? How would I ever find my way back? I would be lost. I was very upset about the prospect, but he was way bigger than me and way stronger too. That's all I remember about that scary episode. I don't recall what happened next. Maybe my mom rescued me. I just don't recall. One day, while my mom was washing out a glass milk bottle at the sink, it broke somehow and deeply sliced open the inside of her forearm from wrist to elbow. I ended up going to stay with a friend of hers for a while she was in the hospital. Actually, it must have been quite a while, since when we were reunited, I didn't actually recognize / remember her. I remember her friend, the woman I had stayed with, had to coax me to go over to this strange woman, saying, "She's your mother." I don't actually recall much about staying with this woman, except that she had a son and that he and I had fought one day and rolled down a hill, tumbling over each other as we went. He had said something I didn't like. I don't remember what. Also, one day at the barber she had taken me to, the barber accidentally cut one of my ears with his scissors. Those seemed to be the only memories I retained from that adventure. Sure, there are others, but they are more like phantoms drifting in the fabric of time and memory without any real form or substance, too fleeting to be recalled. I'm just guessing, but it seems to me that her son that I rolled down the hill with fighting had said something like my mother wasn't coming back for me. I'm not completely certain. It's just a memory that pops in, but may not be, I don't know. Back to John's house. One night, my mom had a date. She met this guy somewhere, and they dated for a while. I remember she introduced me to him one night, and then came the inevitable time when I had to go to bed. But I didn't want to go to bed. I wanted to stay up and enjoy the company too. I wanted to be a part of it all. But I had to go to bed. From my bedroom, I kept calling my mom. I wanted her to let me stay up. Finally, I heard her coming down the hallway. Yay! Maybe I can go back into the living room now. But it wasn't her. It was the guy. And as he stood there talking to me, he took his belt from his pants and then very matter-of-factly proceeded to beat me with it. This had never happened to me before. Sure, sometimes my mom would spank me, but here tonight was a stranger beating me with his belt. I remember when he drew it free from his pants that I didn't even know what that meant, didn't understand the danger that was walking towards me. I didn't realize until the first crack of leather upon my body that hell had suddenly found me alone and unprotected in my bedroom. But I didn't go willingly. Oh no. I screamed bloody murder, for that's what it felt like. I did not know what would be my fate at the hands of this monster, and so let loose my fear and pain in my screams to hasten the ultimate rescue that would come in the form of my mother. And lo, he would regret what he had done this night. I will not ever forget what happened next, which was nothing. Nothing more, nothing but more beating by this creature and his belt until I cried and whimpered myself into submission. Quiet submission, he let me know, would be the only way to make him stop. He communicated to me that as long as I reacted to the beating, that it would continue. My mother never came. Just never came. It became apparent that quiet submission was my only avenue of escape. But not an easy doorway to take, since the overwhelming horror of my situation had me in its grasp, both physically and emotionally. My mother never came. Just never came. How could that be? What did it mean that she never came? How could she let this stranger beat me? I, of course, tried giving her the benefit of the doubt, but how could she not have heard my screams and the crack of leather upon my flesh, upon my small body? Maybe there was somehow a valid explanation. Even now, I find that I want there to be one. But as you may imagine, I asked her about this event several times over the course of our history together. And I must admit that the question was not ever answered satisfactorily, since she claimed not to remember the event. Who knows? Maybe she had gone to the store and just wasn't there at the time. That possibility only just occurred to me. Either way, I did not understand, and I'm sure that in its way, it became an important life lesson for me. And also, in its way, whether fair or not, whether born of misunderstanding or not, changed the relationship between my mom and myself forever. That night, I lost a little bit of my trust and my innocence. I now knew beyond any doubt that the world was not always safe. And from my viewpoint, the one person that I looked to for protection and guidance had betrayed that trust in such a way as to shake the foundations of my understanding of life and the world. Little did I realize at the time that the lesson I was learning that night, a lesson that could be entitled, "Look to Yourself for Protection," was to be an ongoing and important theme in my experience, and that soon all I had known as secure in my world was to come crashing down around me. And that's the end of chapter 5, A Monster in the Night, an autobiographical work. Thank you again for joining me. And I hope you have a good night and a good day.